I've been telling you for years, you want to get a second citizenship or even multiple citizenships to protect yourself. But what I don't want you to do is to get that second citizenship for the wrong reason. I see a lot of wrong reasons online trying to sell you to get a second passport. And today I'm sharing almost a dozen of them and what you need to know to make the right choice. I was recently on social media and I saw an alleged study which said 68% of billionaires have multiple passports, but the average person never even considers getting one. Now, we've met people with hundreds of millions of dollars who have become our client. They never even knew they needed a second passport. We work with folks here who have $1 million or more and they want to get a second passport by investment. They want to get it by starting a business overseas. They want to get it through their ancestry. Learn how we can help you with dozens of different passport options at nomadcapitalist.com/apply. I think we have more options than pretty much anybody out there. But what I don't want you to do is get that second passport because you think it will do something for you that it won't. And so I'm going to go through what this social media post talked about were reasons that a second passport can help you. Many of them are wrong. And what I tell my team is make sure that every client is getting a passport knowing how it's going to help them. So let's start. Multi-jurisdictional wealth layers, they claim a second passport helps with. Billionaires don't keep all their assets in one country. They spread wealth around multiple jurisdictions, ensuring no government can control it or seize it. So right here, we see a common issue with second citizenships. I have no reason to believe, by the way, these people are selling second citizenships. There's just some inaccurate information. And the reason in this case is you don't really need a passport to do that. You don't need more than one passport to keep your assets in multiple jurisdictions. Now, if you are a U.S. citizen, for example, there are going to be banks and brokerages and investments and crypto projects that don't want U.S. citizens as investors. A second passport generally isn't going to help that. Let's take Swiss banks, for example. When Obama implemented FATCA, which forced all the foreign financial institutions to report U.S. accounts to the U.S. government, a lot of Swiss banks, for example, said, great, we just won't take any U.S. citizens. So you can open bank accounts. You can set up trusts. You can set up holding companies. You can move your wealth across multiple jurisdictions. And we made a video on the 3 different types of asset protection, the 3 different levels. Each one's a bit more involved than the next. You can do that with one passport. People have this idea that someone once said, oh, I opened this bank account on my Vanuatu passport. No. If you're an American, you're an American. And if you have some kind of baggage, whether that's being American or something else that the bank needs to know about, they're going to evaluate that. A retail bank account that you get by opening a residence permit somewhere, Malaysia, for example. We have our event, Nomad Capitalist, live in Malaysia. If you go in, they're generally going to say, what country's passport is your residence permit in? Great, you have that one citizenship. But if you go to a Swiss bank, for example, they're going to ask what all your passports are. Certainly every bank is going to ask if you are a U.S. citizen. And I imagine if any other country decides to demand that foreign banks phone home to them, they'll ask if you're one of those too. So you can create an asset protection structure with just one passport, the U.S. passport being the biggest impediment to that in that certain options aren't available to you. And what you should also know is that wherever you live, not your passport, but where you live and where you pay taxes, there may be reporting requirements for that foreign trust or that foreign company that you use for asset protection. And so that's not really based on your citizenship. I mean, you don't have to be a U.S. citizen to live in the United States and be required to disclose your foreign bank accounts and your foreign trusts and your foreign companies. Some other countries do require some level of disclosure as well. That's the kind of service that we offer to our clients, is connecting them with all the different tax professionals and experts that they need to set this up. So asset protection, don't necessarily have to have one passport. The biggest thing for me, if you're an American getting a second passport, is the ability to potentially in the future no longer be American and get rid of that baggage, which you generally wouldn't do if you didn't have the second passport that will now become your first passport. Next issue, and this is a big one that I have talked about, I don't like. Legal identity switching. Different passports allow for alternative names and legal structures. I don't even understand what that means. Making business transactions smoother and more private. The whole thing of more private from your ex-husband, more private from certain prying eyes, perhaps. More private from the government, forget it. We're in an era of financial disclosure. You're moving your money, and you're moving yourself in many cases, to get a lower tax rate, to get better returns, to get more diversification, to get away from one currency, et cetera, et cetera. The idea of privacy, sure. I mean, there's some of that from certain people, but the idea that you're simply keeping your stuff out of the eyes of a government, that's like 1980s Wolf of Wall Street movie stuff. The idea of changing your name on a passport is dumb. From the Nomad Capitalist R&D team, one of our colleagues said, even though this may be legal under very specific circumstances, it is a very high-risk approach. Absolutely not advisable, as this can lead to issues with KYC and AML verification at banks, for example, which will negate the whole asset protection stuff we're talking about. Forming companies, foundations, and trusts could also become very complicated. So this whole idea, oh, you're going to have a new name and they'll never find you. Dumb. Number 3, geo-arbitrage for financial freedom. By structuring their income in one country, investing in the other, and holding assets in a third, they legally optimize tax rates and economic benefits. This is what we talk about for years. I've been telling you since 2012, geo-arbitrage. I've talked about what I call my global citizen sandwich. Let's take one example in Asia. Bank and store wealth in Singapore at the top. Live in Malaysia, which is almost as good, a little bit more free, not quite as developed, but a great place to live, and invest down the chain in Cambodia, for example. There's good returns. Cambodia, by the way, has a citizenship program. We've had more people being interested in Cambodia's citizenship. I've gotten a bit more comfortable with it. But again, you don't need a passport for this. You can have a global citizen sandwich as one country's citizen. So, like, I'll get to why you should have a second passport, but you don't need it to structure your income in one country. Now, what does that mean? That could mean if you're an investor, you have stocks in different countries. I happen to have stocks, among other places, on the Singapore exchange. I may not hold those in a brokerage account in Singapore, so I have some geo-arbitrage. Stock in one country, tax-free dividends, tax-free capital gains. I can hold that in a brokerage account somewhere else. I can hold that in my own name. I can hold that in a company structure. I can hold that brokerage account in a trust. So I'm structure my income through my investments potentially in different countries. I can also structure my income in a business through different countries. We have companies in different places in the world. We have a company in Hong Kong, for example. I don't live in Hong Kong. I get certain tax benefits. I move the money. I then get to invest in another. I then get to hold assets. Let's say I want to own property, right? That's the global citizen sandwich in a nutshell. You don't need to have multiple passports. You just don't. Number 4, ultra-private banking access. Some citizenships grant entry to elite financial institutions that offer stronger security, privacy, and high-yield investment options. Now, I have told you about this. Again, some of these banks will just take you as a non-resident. Some of the banks will take you if you become a resident. Bahrain, for example, Saudi Arabia, you get a residence permit. In Bahrain, you get it by buying real estate. In Saudi Arabia, you pay a fee, you get residence for life. Now, generally speaking, you can open a bank account in those countries. So you don't have to be a citizen. Now, becoming a citizen of a country in the Middle East is generally next to impossible. But you can potentially go as a non-resident. You can potentially be a resident. I mean, the more money you deposit, generally the more options that are open. I mean, if you have $1 million or millions, or in some cases tens of millions to deposit, opportunities will open up that maybe aren't available to other non-residents. And so, again, the U.S. citizenship could get in the way of this. The right passport is important. I mean, there's certain banks in, let's say, Europe, where you're not getting generally higher returns, but you're getting allegedly more safety. Where there were some banks in Austria. We only work with Russia and the CIS. Now, I think they pulled back from Russia. Perhaps they still work with, Tajikistan and Armenia and those kind of places. And that's what they understand, and that's who they take. And so if you were to get, let's say, Armenian citizenship by descent because you had an Armenian family member or you were baptized in the Armenian church, perhaps as a bank that they specialize in people from that part of the world. And that could make your life easier. I mean, a couple of those banks were like, yeah, that's really all we deal with is people from that part of the world. That's not really that common. I think really what's more important is where you live. And so, if I go and want to open a bank account in Singapore, I have a home in Malaysia. That makes sense to them, that I have a home in Malaysia. Why are you here? More than someone who says, I'm just here on a tourist visa from the U.S. and I want to move my money to Singapore. They're like, wait a second, we're very compliance-oriented people. Why? Now, they don't understand diversification as much, and they also think that U.S. banks are safe, which I happen to believe Singaporean banks, and statistically they are, a hell of a lot safer than U.S. banks. But that's not what a compliance person in Singapore is necessarily going to think. So citizenships granting access to elite financial institutions, there's some cases of that, but I think really residence is what comes down to it. Where do you live? Where do you pay taxes? If you go to a lot of these banks, that's their big thing. Again, it's more about where you can get shut out of. I was in Monaco a couple of years ago, and I said, hey, if I wanted to get residence, let me see how it works. You have to put money in the bank. The bank does the due diligence on you, essentially. And once they do the due diligence, Monaco, the country, is just, yeah, okay, the bank checked you. If your funds are clean, come on in. I was a tax resident of a country where they're like, that's a little exotic for us. Come back later. Whereas I think if I would have gone in with like a European tax residence, which could have been very tax friendly, you could be tax resident in Italy, Greece, Ireland, Malta, Cyprus, and pay very low taxes, but that's nearby, so they understand it. So you might get shut out, but again, that's about residence. Next step, tax-free wealth growth. Some passports provide access to jurisdictions where capital gains, inheritance, and foreign income are either tax-free or heavily reduced. So here's the big misconception. You can simply get a second passport and stop paying taxes. And this is often done by some purveyors of second citizenship, where they're down, they got an office in St. Kitts and Nevis, and they play this sleight of hand game where, oh, we have no taxes here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Right, but if you live in the United States or Canada or the UK or Australia, the St. Kitts passport isn't like a shield against tax in your own country. St. Kitts doesn't tax you when you're in their country. It doesn't tell other countries they can't tax you when you live there. And so, for example, we help a lot of clients get Caribbean citizenship by investment. There's 5 different programs. And you can move within each of those countries, plus you can move to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, plus you have a lesser level of access to the greater Caribbean community of more than a dozen countries. So you've got a greater freedom of movement to where if you're an American or a Canadian and you can only live in your country as of right, now you can have access to more than a dozen countries at some level. That offers a freedom of mobility that you have multiple places you can live without having to go and necessarily get a de facto residence permit. But one thing I've told you for years is if you get a Caribbean citizenship, it doesn't have to be in St. Kitts, but if you can go and live in St. Kitts at any time you choose, you don't have to, but you could. Yeah, now you can pay zero tax in St. Kitts. If you're American, there is citizenship-based taxation there, but we've made videos about how you can reduce your taxes living overseas, particularly as a business owner, to as low as 0 or possibly single or low double digits. Everybody who's not American, at least for now, because I think more countries will copy the U.S., everybody else, at least for now, where you live is important. So the passport offers you the ability to live there. Let's say that you're British and you're tired of paying high taxes and you're watching the country go down the tubes. British is one of our largest client bases right now. If you were to get St. Kitts and Nevis citizenship by investment, you can now live in St. Kitts and Nevis, whereas you couldn't before. You could go and visit St. Kitts and Nevis, but you can't just move in. And so the passport offers a level of permanence higher than a residence permit. In the Caribbean, they generally function on offering you citizenship. There's not really as many options for residence. So you get that citizenship. And now for the rest of your life, anytime you want to, you can go and live in that tax-free country. But simply having the passport doesn't help you. One thing that one of my colleagues said was some countries allow you to claim tax residence or straight up tax you by virtue of citizenship if you're not tax resident anywhere else. That's one thing we've been telling you is like if you're Australian and you don't properly exit the system, they've got kind of like a backdoor way now of taxing you no matter where you live. You've got to get out properly. One of my colleagues, Javier, they call him the tax terminator. That's what Michelle McCory calls him. He says, I'm a citizen of Venezuela, and if I were to leave Venezuela and spend 0 days per year there, I can still claim Venezuelan tax residence by virtue of my citizenship and enjoy an excellent network of tax treaties and very flexible CFC, controlled foreign corporation rules, which allow me to legally retain earnings in foreign entities tax-free as long as I do not become tax resident somewhere else. So, sure, in that case, if you had a Venezuelan passport and you traveled the globe, never triggering tax residence anywhere else, you could set up your affairs in a way to where you're Venezuelan tax resident, and there's probably some banks that like that, and there's probably some banks that really don't like that when they ask you where you pay tax, but you could get that tax residence, and you could keep your taxes pretty low. So this is all pretty complicated stuff, as you can see, but simply saying having a passport means your capital gains and inheritance tax goes away. No, what matters is where you live. A passport allows you to live somewhere because a passport is given, generally speaking, to a citizen. Citizens can live in the country whenever they want, or they don't have to live there. I mean, if you are, let's say, Canadian, you don't lose your Canadian citizenship when you leave, but yet you could go and live somewhere else. And so the passport helps you do that, but a residence permit could too, right? You could have no capital gains, inheritance, or foreign income in a country that gives you a residence permit with 0% tax. Next, anonymous holdings through trusts and foundations. Ay, chihuahua. This anonymous thing, I'm just not a big fan. Keeping your affairs private, I'm all for it. But the idea that you're somehow invisible to everybody, not a thing. Billionaires create trusts under different national laws, ensuring their names never appear on official ownership asset records. Sure, and yet somebody knows you own it. If you don't want, again, like your ex-husband to know that you own a property somewhere, you can do that. If you want to make it harder to take, you can do that. And you don't need a passport to do that. I mean, the second passport does not facilitate that. Next up, exclusive diplomatic access. Let's take a sip here. There's a lot to digest with TWGT. Some high net worth individuals obtain diplomatic or special status through certain passports, allowing them to travel with privileges unavailable to ordinary citizens. Sure. If you're the citizen of a big country like the U.S., by the way, I mean, I think it's pretty standard that if you donate $250,000 or raise $250,000 for a presidential administration and you get on their radar, they'll give you some ambassador job in the U.S. because, it's not a corrupt country at all. So, I mean, in the U.S., apparently, if you basically pay enough, you can get it. I think in other countries, I mean, I know a couple of guys who are in the ambassador corps in Georgia. I mean, they're lifelong civil servants. Now, could you be an attaché or something? Potentially. Could you be an honorary consul? Yeah, I think that's perhaps easier. And yet, I mean, sure, if you're an American, they're probably not really handing out honorary consul posts very easy. And so if you went and got a citizenship somewhere else in a smaller country, yeah, maybe you could get in with the right people, and maybe you could ask to serve in that role. I don't think they're just giving it to everybody. I mean, there was a scandal in one of the islands a while ago, but they were offering, diplomatic status, and certainly smaller countries maybe are a little bit looser with it. But I don't know that simply getting a second passport is going to do that. And I think that the privileges of diplomatic immunity are kind of people pump it up more than what it really is. Next up, dual citizenship unlocks access to elite real estate, stock markets, and private equity deals. I mean, there may be some examples of that. Yeah, I mean, are there some places where, hey, we have a better deal for non-citizens than citizens? I guess more on the tax side than what you can invest in. And again, if it's Americans who have the most, who have come with the most baggage, being American plus something else doesn't help. The big play, if you're American and you want all the baggage gone, is getting rid of U.S. citizenship. And so you got to get a couple of other citizenships ideally, because you want to have two at all times. So you need two. You need to have three. So you drop one and you have two. And ideally, perhaps you want to have one that allows you to go back to the U.S. So that's a little bit of, it's not quite, I mean, there's some truth to that, but it's not entirely true. I will say, I mean, some countries restrict who can buy real estate in their country to only citizens. Cambodia, as we mentioned, is one example. You can't buy land. You really can't even buy like shop house apartments anymore. You have to buy condos in Cambodia. And so they have a citizenship program. And so if you want to do business there and you want to own land and you want to be on par with everybody, then sure. Is that barrier-free global investing? No, it's barrier-free Cambodia investing. And I guess you could get as many passports as you want. That's something that I, enjoy doing as a hobby. But let's go on to the next one. Untouchable business structures. By setting up companies across multiple countries, billionaires, and anybody can do this, ensure their businesses stay protected from all sorts of nasty stuff that can happen to them, including economic instability, people coming after them, what have you. You don't need a passport to do that. I mean, anyone with one passport can set up companies in different parts of the world. We help clients do it all the time. And we've had people come and say, hey, I need to get a second passport to not pay taxes in my country. Unless that country is the United States, you don't need a second passport to do that. Now, I think some countries are going in that direction. They're making it harder to get out. If you don't want the passport, it's good to have a backup for it. Better years too early than a day too late. But, generally speaking, you can just create that structure anywhere. We help clients do it all the time. Now, could you use a different passport on your structure? Sure. Is there some extra privacy to that? I guess. Hey, I'm going to set up my company in the Cayman Islands as a St. Lucian rather than as a Canadian. Okay, I mean, that's cool. But again, if you ever live in a country that requires you to disclose where you have your companies or where your money is, what passport you put in the paperwork, sure, maybe somebody sees the paperwork and they don't know you're Canadian. That could help. By the way, I mean, due to countries like Venezuela and Iran being on the naughty lists of Western countries, you're seeing more of a crackdown on that. So, regulatory arbitrage is the next one. If one country imposes strict financial rules, they shift operations to another one. Again, you may not need a passport to do this. Luxury assets are registered under different laws. Yachts, jets, luxury real estate are often registered under specific passports to provide legal advantages and lower taxation. Your yacht is flagged where your yacht is flagged. So this is one of the great examples for me of what we say: go where you're treated best. Your yacht should go where it's treated best. Your house, I mean, everything, your business, everything should go where it's treated best. Yachts, to me, are a great example. They fly the flag that's most convenient for them because they're at sea and they can do that. You should do the same thing, but having another passport isn't necessarily going to make it easier to register your yacht somewhere else that's convenient. We've got two more. Multi-nation business insider access. Certain citizenships allow individuals to enter exclusive industries where foreign ownership is restricted. Sure. 100% true, says the team. Regulated industries like banking, telecom, oil, real estate is often restricted only to citizens, or certain types of it are. National security related stuff. I mean, sure. So this is more of a billionaire one where it's like, I'm going to go buy a port somewhere. And if I'm a citizen of the country, that'll make it easier, or they'll approve my deal more easily. If I'm going to, be in the telecom space, I will say, I mean, there are certain companies, if you buy on a U.S. brokerage, you can't buy certain, Chinese and other sanctioned companies, like China Mobile, for example. Can't buy on a U.S. platform. I think can't buy if you're a U.S. citizen. And so if you want to buy land in Cambodia, you have to be a citizen. They have that program, right? If you want to buy, land in Thailand, they don't have an investment program, but you could, I guess, live there and get married and eventually work towards citizenship. So, sure. But again, is that going to change your whole life around the world? No. But if you get a citizenship in a country where you are an investor, there can be downsides to that. There could also be a lot of upsides to that. I mean, sometimes it's better to be a foreign investor. So it's not set in stone. Dual system asset transfers. That sounds a little confusing. Having multiple citizenships allows seamless legal transfers of assets across borders without triggering heavy taxes or regulatory scrutiny. No. Banks do scrutiny, banks do KYC, banks, hold transfers depending on where the money's coming from, where it's going to, the address on the incoming transfer. Taxes are based on where the asset is and where you are. If I own assets in the United States, it doesn't matter. I'm not a U.S. taxpayer anymore. What matters is the U.S. will tax assets in its borders how they want to. So if I buy a U.S. dividend-paying stock, the U.S. tells me what the tax is, not where I live. And then where I live imposes their own tax. And so you can figure out how to, again, buy tax-free, dividend-paying, Singapore stocks and live in a tax-free jurisdiction and have your holding company or trust that owns that being tax neutral, and you can pay nothing. But it's nothing to do with reducing regulatory scrutiny, which you're not going to do. And the multiple citizenships is not going to help you do that. The bottom line for me is, why do you want to have multiple citizenships? You want to be prepared for what could come. You might want to get rid of a passport that has baggage. I lived outside of the United States for years. I didn't miss it. So ultimately I decided, why do I want to be subject to all these restrictions? I don't like the culture of you telling me what I can do when I don't even live in your country. When I lived in your country, I followed all the rules, and I did when I was their citizen too. But I said, I don't think it's right. I'm going to take a stand. And you may want to give up a citizenship that has baggage for the reasons that we've mentioned. But the bottom line for multiple citizenship is multiple options. It's not about switching your identity. It's not about hiding. It's about having options in a legal way that has a sense of permanence that a residence permit or being a non-resident doesn't offer. If you want our help looking at your options for second citizenship, you can go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. We charge our clients a fee. And why I like that model is you can go and get your quote unquote free consultation with some company that sells citizenship, let's say in the Caribbean. The free consultation is a sales call, in case you didn't realize that. We don't do free consultations. We do sales calls, and we'll be happy to tell you if we can't help you, we don't want to take your money. And that upsets some people, by the way. We don't want to take their money to not be able to help them. But we're not going to take your money if we can't help you. We don't have just a handful of options that we have to shove down everyone's throat. And so if you come to us because you paid us a fee, and you tell me the only reason I would want a second passport is to not have to pay taxes in Australia, I'll tell you, as long as you live in Australia, you're going to pay Australian taxes. And that's true in most Western countries. And as long as you leave Australia properly and cuddle the ties and do everything that our tax people tell you to do, you won't pay taxes there either. You don't need a second passport for that. And if that's literally your only reason, remember, there was one guy, that's the only reason I would get a second passport. I said, maybe you consider getting one in the future if Australia goes down the same road the US does. But if that's your criteria, you don't need one. Congratulations, I just saved you at the time $130,000. Now it would be a greater savings. And so you pay us a fee. Sometimes we tell our clients, you don't need to spend that amount of money. You don't need to do that. You don't need this. You don't need that. Because they went to someone who only sells one thing, and they were convinced that they needed the only thing that guy sold. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. We'll be happy to walk you through the actual reasons. We don't need to be talking about multi-nation business insider access or barrier-free global investing. We're just going to be real with you. What do you want to accomplish? Let's go through the known unknowns. Let's go through the unknown unknowns. And we will work through it. And you know what? Yes, we believe people need a second citizenship at a minimum. And so a lot of clients, yes, we will recommend which is the best for you out of dozens of options from multiple different ways to get it, not just by investment, but there's other ways too. But we are going to push you to make a decision. Do you want our service or not? And we're going to push ourselves to decide, can we help this person or not? And if we can help you, we charge you a fee. We work for you. We don't work for collecting fat commissions, selling you real estate. We don't work selling the same thing to everybody. We work representing you for a fee. Go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. That fee could save you a whole lot of money over the free consultation.